Right. Good evening, everybody. It's been so long. Welcome to this Cabinet meeting of Horsham District Council on the 19th of November. I won't go through most of the whatever housekeeping stuff because everyone knows where they are and where they're going. But as usual, mobile phones on silent, please. And yes, an audio recording is being made. Apologies for absence. We have none because everybody's here this evening. Item 2, minutes on the pages 3 to 6 of the agenda. The minutes of the Cabinet meeting held on the 8th of October are on pages 3 to 6. I move these minutes are approved as a correct record. Are you in agreement? Lovely. Declaration of members' interests. Does any member of the Cabinet present have an interest to declare relating to an item on the agenda? No. Thank you. 4. Announcements. Can I please remind members to direct questions to the Cabinet rather than officers in the room? Cabinet members will refer to officers if necessary. Do any other Cabinet members have any announcements this evening? No. Chief Executive, any announcements? That's a no then, no announcements from the Chief Exec. Item 5, public statements. No statements from the members of the public have been received. So that takes us on to item 6, update on the Council's financial position in 2025-26 and medium-term financial strategy 2026-27 to 2029-30 on pages 7 to 20 of the agenda. I invite Councillor Mark Bainan, Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Finance and Resources, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chairman. There are 2 parts to this paper. The first is on the Council's financial position and forward projections, which the Cabinet will be asked to note. And the second part is a recommendation to join the West Sussex business rates pool. I'd like to just put it the other way around and start with the business rates. So we are currently in the business rates pool, and for those of you who may not be aware, well, probably everyone is, but we collect business rates on behalf of central government. We don't collect them for ourselves. However, depending on the take and the growth, we are able to retain a small percentage of those rates. And it's in most recent years, it's been financially advantageous for us to pool our retention with the other councils in West Sussex into a business rates pool, and that pool is then used for various projects of economic and local development that cross boundaries. Just some examples, or have a wider than just a district benefit. A couple of examples of those recently have been the costs of setting up a team to produce the business case for local government reorganisation, which was funded from the pool. And another one actually in our district was financial support for a local abattoir that provides services across the county. So those were 2. The decision for how this money is spent in the business rates is essentially it's the leaders, the council leaders from across the county who agree on proposals as and when they come up. We think it'll be a good idea to remain in the business rates pool, but we can't know for certain until we get the results of government reform of the process of business rates. But if we are to join the business rates, we have to do so now. But we do have the option, if we then decide it's not so financially favourable, to withdraw. The reverse is not true. It means that if we don't join now, we will not have an opportunity to join later. So it makes perfect sense to me to join, and then we'll ask Cabinet to approve that any subsequent decision to withdraw, if that was deemed financially sensible, would be delegated to the Director of Resources in consultation with myself. So that's the only decision that I'm going to be asking Cabinet to take this evening. The second part is around our financial position and our financial projections going forward, and this is information to note. Rather, there's no decision to be taken here. Now, the subject received a pretty wide airing at the last meeting of the Policy and Scrutiny Finance and Performance Committee, so I don't intend to repeat everything again tonight that was said at that meeting, but I will summarise. I'm looking at the current position, at month 6 of this financial year, there is a forecast operational surplus of £531,000 for the whole year. But as usual, there are swings and roundabouts. So the revenues and benefits budget is likely to be overspent by a substantial amount, £500,000. And that's largely due to factors involved in the transition to universal credit and how collection and refunds are made. These things are outside HDC's control. But this loss is being more than offset by revenues from parking, planning and treasury management, which have outperformed initial projections. Moving on to the capital expenditure, the CapEx budget is currently forecast to achieve 88% completion by year end, based on returns by the heads of services. But I can't help thinking that there may be some wishful optimism here. I would personally regard 75% as a good result, and that may be closer to the final outcome. We shall see. So in general for this year, I'm comfortable with our current position. Looking ahead to next year, there is, of course, as ever, some uncertainty. MHCLG, the ministry that is responsible, has told us, together with, I think, 48 other councils, that the implementation of the government's fair funding formula means that we can expect a 7% reduction in settlement funding compared to last year. But even that is not very clear, because it's 7% of what? We don't know what grants will or will not be rolled into the funding assessment, and either way that could make a very significant difference. Will any account be taken of inflation? Probably not, because it wasn't last year. And then we don't know the settlement till literally in the week before Christmas, and that's the provisional settlement. But we do know that MHCLG's arithmetic will assume that we raise council tax by the maximum permitted without referendum, that is 3%. If we raise it by a lower figure, then we will have to fill the gap from elsewhere. However, we do expect a 3-year settlement, so that at least would remove some of the uncertainty, even if we get, as seems likely, less than good news. But based on our assumptions, or perhaps better termed best guesses, we expect a healthy surplus next year of around 1.5 million, but this transforms into a 2.75 million deficit over the following 3 years to 2029-30. Although this extends beyond the anticipated life of HDC, we will need to take measures to bring this deficit number down. And I'm confident that this can be done, as we've shown so far in this administration, by transforming a projected deficit of 4 million up to the end of 2027-28, which is the end of HDC, into a surplus of 1.25 million. So that's the summary, but I will, of course, be taking any questions that members and members present have. But just to say, the recommendation is to note the report and then to approve that Council remains in the West Sussex business rates pool and delegates that authority on a future decision to the director in consultation with myself. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Can I take any questions or comments from members, please? Councillor Clark?
Thank you. I was quite taken by the story being told by the cabinet member until the last point. Very unfortunate comment there. It was just a projected plan. It wasn't going to happen. In fact, just like your deficit, which you're projecting at the end of this council, is not going to happen because you're going to take steps to address it. So I'm a bit disappointed in that comment. Essentially, with a large number of imponderables and uncertainties in any of the funding, it's very difficult to ask any in-depth questions or searching questions on the MTFS particularly. A number of items do spring to mind. Already at the ONS committee, the question arose over capital expenditure and ambitious programmes looking at £30 million of capex in the next financial year. The general fund stands at 24.8 million at the end of March 2025, and that's not ring fenced for anything. Essentially, the earmarked reserves of 24 million, which is basically earmarked for things that we already know. So the question for me arises is that you've got a £30 million project list for next year, but in fact you've got a limited amount of unreserved funds, basically open funds, general funds, of which 6 is set aside as being the minimum reserves anyway. So basically my question would be is how are we going to address that increase in capital funding in view of the resources that we have? Because at the moment we're short of manpower. We have an apprentice on board, which means that in fact it takes away some of the manpower that we have because they have to be supervised and seen to. You said we might reach 88%, but 75% would be a good deal. That's fine, but that means that there's projects for this year which will carry over to next year. So that's over and above what you're planning. Surely the way forward, and I know we all said we should spend more capital, and quite agree with that, but the problem is how do you do it consistently and how do you do it effectively? And I've not heard anything in what's been said as to how we're going to effectively address the issue. I hear the wish list, if I can put it that way, but not how we're going to do it effectively because it's probably too late already to do it because we haven't got the manpower. So maybe you can address some comments or explain to us how you're going to do it. Thank you.
Mark?
Yes, happy to do so. I mean, first of all, the capex budget isn't all from the revenue reserve. So something in the region of 10 million is still funding, for example, which is earmarked. But I share the concern about the capability of the council to deliver on such a huge programme. And I think we haven't set the capex budget. These were initial figures brought from the projects that have been brought forward in-house, and if we were to do them all. I think we will take a different approach to that, and we won't be doing 30 million in 1 year. In fact, what we may do is we may spread that over 2 years, which would be 15 million a year, which is approaching roughly the same as what we're going to be doing this year. But I stress we've not made those decisions yet, and the capex budget will be brought to council. It will be brought to cabinet in the beginning of February, and then to council at the end of February, and that's when those decisions will be made and confirmed. But I'm not expecting a capital budget of £30 million. In terms of, it's not just about funding it from the reserves, but you've also raised the point about capacity, and that is another concern for us. And it's not just a question of, well, let's go out and hire more people, because it's quite difficult in this current environment to hire people for an organisation that is very time limited. So you can do a certain amount in terms of short-term contracts and consultants, but that's generally not that cost effective. And also you don't have people who've been here for a significant time to push that through. So we will be revising, well, we haven't actually published any proposals yet, but the emerging proposals we'll be looking at very closely, and we'll come out with a distinct and costed plan, which not only will be supporting the capital programme, but taking account of those things that you'll be hearing from my colleague later on the annual plan, and how much of that involves capital expenditure. So I hope those assuage some of your concerns.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you. Well, I am partly reassured, or not assuaged, but I hear what is being said. So basically, what we've got here is a shopping list of projects, basically, that we're going to pick and choose. Sorry, you're going to pick and choose. Cabinet's going to pick and choose which ones we will pursue and which ones have the highest likelihood of success, I think is what you're saying from what you've said. That does make sense. My concern is that we put it here in writing, but didn't actually say this was the shopping list. So I took it at face value in the table that was the plan, in inverted commas, whatever that might mean. So you can understand where I'm coming from. I'm glad to hear what you said. I mean, the issue of short-term contractors and stuff, I do understand that. Some of them are very good, some of them are not. I understand the problems. I've been there personally. So thank you for the partial reassurance anyway.
Councillor Ellis-Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Reassured that you are now considering over a 2-year period rather than a 1-year period. I think listening to what was said at the overview and scrutiny, and you alluded to it in your comments earlier, I think we're probably being somewhat too ambitious with some of our projects. I think we should reduce the number. It's a challenge, I know, because everybody wants their thing done. But I think in light of the fact that we have just over 2 years, 2.5 years before the Unitary Council comes, I think we should be more focused, fewer things, because we know that, and we've heard that 25% of projects are going to be carried forward, and we've discussed this at the overview and scrutiny. We're carrying projects forward, so 25% this year, and next year we're just creating things for the future. So I think it would be prudent to reduce the number of things that we're doing and give greater focus to those things that we're doing. It's well established that try and do too many things on too many fronts, you achieve very little, or you actually don't achieve what you want to achieve. So I think I would be happier to see fewer projects, greater focus on those projects over the next 2 years, and that may release funds for other things. I have a comment about section 5.1 of the document, making wholesale cuts to popular non-statutory services such as parks, countryside, planning, enforcement. This was rejected, and I trust that it's not going to come back. I would like to be reassured that it's not, because we find ourselves without a local plan. We have a lot of unauthorised sites within our community and our district, sorry. We're going to see a lot more applications coming through. So my view on this is we should actually be considering how we could add resources to enforcement. Because of a lot of, as I've mentioned, a lot of unauthorised sites in our district, and there may be a lot more coming forward. So I think we should be considering increasing enforcement, planning enforcement, and because we are asking them to do a lot more work now. B&G is now on their radar. A lot more pre-commencement conditions are coming through, a lot more conditions coming through, and so I would hope that we could get assurance that we're not going to, this is not going to come back in terms of resources. The other thing I'd like to just mention, and we've heard about recruitment at the overview and scrutiny. One of the things we should do, and give due consideration to, is the retention of the people and key people within the council at the moment. one of the things we shouldn't be allowing is, or try and resist, is that we have a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience within the council, and one of the things is that we don't want that to happen, is that to walk out the door tomorrow because that knowledge and experience is gone. Is there any way that with certain roles we can actually offer some sort of incentive to stay up until we become a unitary council? Is there anything we can do in that particular area for key roles within the council that we would like to ensure do not walk out the door between now and then?
Wrong button, sorry. Thanks very much, Councillor Ellis-Brown. I'm coming in on this one a little bit to start with. When it comes to items like planning enforcement, it's always a sensitive item because I know how important it is, particularly to members. However, I feel like a stuck record sometimes with this, but I must reiterate, it is a non-statutory service. So whenever you come into, if we find ourselves in the situation where, funding is dramatically cut or whatever can befall you in terms of financial perspective, we will be obliged to protect the statutory services first. That doesn't mean that there's any intention to actually do anything negative when it comes to planning enforcement or indeed parks and countries or anything else. I think it's just what I would describe as a fact of life. So I can't promise you it won't come back because I can't promise you what is or isn't going to happen in the environment that we're operating in. That's just where we're at. In terms of the spreading of the capital programme over 2 years, I mean, I support looking at that. I think, though, when we talk about the £30 million programme, and in terms of then breaking it down into amounts of money, this much this year, this much that year, it's not quite as simple as that because of the nature of some of the projects. For example, the Capitol Theatre refurbishment is a very complex project. Awful lots of things can happen along the way. However, we are committed to delivering that by essentially this time next year, and that's a £10.2 million project which we're committed to delivering next year. Other projects are such as like the LAF properties and the homes we're purchasing with Section 106 money. That's a £5 million budget for that, and then I can't remember how much it is for the LAF properties as well. But that is a sort of eminently, it's. I don't want to diminish the work or the issues that people have to do, but in the scheme of things, it's kind of big money, but not massive complexity. You then have other projects that probably are not anywhere near as much in financial terms to actually deliver, but excuse my language, but they could sometimes be bloody hard to actually deliver for all sorts of reasons. So there's a bit more nuance there in terms of the profiling of the projects over the period. I think when it comes to retention, I think before doing anything, I think it's probably appropriate to ask the head of paid service for any comments on that before I get anywhere, say anything I shouldn't.
I think the first thing I'd say is we are not at the moment hemorrhaging staff, nor is there any reason for us to hemorrhage staff, because the transfer of undertakings, protection of employment regulations, and Lauren can even tell me which year it is, do apply to our staff, and they will transfer to the new organisation. So the only person at risk of losing their job in this local government reorganisation at the moment is me. Now, beyond the setting up of the new authority, of course, there is a commitment to make savings, and of course, that is likely to come from staffing. However, with a churn rate of around about 10% per year and the type of savings that were put into the business case, there is no reason to assume that there will be mass redundancies for staff. And I've made it very clear to them that that isn't the case. You asked whether or not I had any mechanisms I could use to retain staff. Within local government in the past on key projects, I have used golden handcuffs. I'm not using golden handcuffs at the moment. I can't see any need to. I think my staff know how good they are. They know how valued they are. And I hope that means that they would stay. And if they are having doubts, then I hope they would talk to me or talk to their managers so that we will pick up early. And I think this is an open enough organisation on the staff side for people to do that. Thank you.
Before coming back to Len to see if he wants to follow up, or just Mark for some other points. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Ernest Brown, for those comments. I think one thing I'd stress that it's not about us cutting back on projects that we plan to do, because we haven't made any decisions on these yet. Well, some, obviously, the capital are there, but there's a load of other projects that haven't been agreed at cabinet level or council level or any level. So it's not about reversing a decision that has yet to be made. That's the first thing. The second one is around protection of non-statutory services. Well, yes, we have a duty to protect the statutory services first. That's obvious. But to the average resident, they don't really make any distinction between what is a statutory and a non-statutory service. And I guess most wouldn't be able to say which one. If I said, well, these two services, they may not know which is statutory, which is not. And our position has always been that we will do our utmost to avoid any cuts in services, and that remains our position. If something happens that just takes the rug away from under your feet, we'll have to respond to that. But our ongoing direction of travel, our way of operating in this council is to maintain the services. And if we have to do things by new ways of doing things, new efficiencies, other ways of doing it, other ways of raising funds, then those are the things that we will definitely look at first. Cuts are the last thing we want to do.
Len?
Thank you very much. I fully understand that enforcement is not a statutory function, but it does have a duty to investigate. And without such a function, one could put forward a case that's actually, you don't need planning. Right. You don't need planning if you haven't got enforcement. They could put a case forward for that. So it's a core feature of our planning system. And it's core and it's key to actually the guidance that is provided, that we should promote confidence in the planning system in our actions that we take in planning. And I think we need to be mindful of that. So we don't have there's no statutory function, but we do have a duty to investigate. And the discretionary part is what decision we make. Are we going to pursue that or etc.? But I think it is important that we investigate. And to do that effectively, have we got the right level of resources? That's my point on that one. I'd like to thank the Chief Exec for the comments there. I will endorse, in my experience with working with the officers, predominantly in planning, I have to say, over the last 2 years, or 2.5 years, we have some exceptionally talented officers. And they are exceptional. And we see that every planning committee and in my briefings. And I'm just worried that, as we get closer to this particular, we move to a unitary council, they become more and more attractive to the commercial world and where they can earn a lot more. And we know from a recent survey by the UK government that 90% of councils do not have the right level of resources in planning. It may be that we're in the 10%, forgive me, I don't know, but I'm just concerned that we have some exceptionally talented officers in planning, and it would be a great shame if they were to, if we didn't have those for the next 2.5 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Lambert.
Thank you, Leader. I would like to endorse everything that Councillor Ellis Brown has said. Compliance is necessary for planning, as he says, and it may be non-statutory, but if we're going to do it, we've got to do it well. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it at all. And if we don't do it at all, then, as he says, we might just as well not do planning. And we have amazing planning officers. It would be such a shame to lose them.
Oh, Ruth.
Obviously, as a Cabinet Member for Planning and Infrastructure, I would entirely endorse the comments that that enforcement is really a very important function, and I just think it's important to give some reassurance here that our enforcement team, our excellent enforcement team, are well aware of the changing situation due to the current planning situation, the number of applications we're receiving, and are absolutely working on having the appropriate structure in order to enable us to respond to that. So there is no question that we are trying to abolish enforcement. So I just felt that it's being laboured to such an extent that it's necessary to say that at this point. I'll give the Director an opportunity to add anything she thinks is necessary at this point, if she thinks there is anything we need to say further. But we are not trying to get rid of this.
I'm grateful for the opportunity, thank you, but actually I think it's been covered extensively by the Cabinet Member, thank you.
Thank you very much. I just, yeah, you know what I'm like. I don't make promises I can't keep, and I once said, when it comes to these things and managing resources and commitments, I once heard, well, probably an old-fashioned phrase that one shouldn't use really, but it was that it was an American one actually. Every housewife knows that the first cheque you pay is for the mortgage and the second is for the insurance. Then you can actually start thinking about what your priorities and decisions are. And so that's why I always say statutory first, because that's what we have to do by law. It's just a guiding principle. It doesn't mean we wanted to do, you know, take any other steps. Right, any other comments or questions on this one? Nope, lovely. So from any other comments from Cabinet members on this one? Right then. In which case, can we go to the vote, please, on the recommendations? All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Right then. Onwards to item 7, Housing Benefits Modified Scheme 2627 on pages 21 to 24 of the agenda. Once again, I invite Mark to introduce the report.
This does not represent any change in what we're doing at the moment. The modification that the title refers to is for those people seeking council tax relief. There's a means test process, and we discount any receipt of war disability pension or war widows pension from that calculation. That's a discretionary thing which we can do as a council. It's not statutory to do so, but we think that's the right thing to do. But it requires that we re-vote or re-endorse this position on an annual basis. So this is really just a business as usual confirmation item. So I recommend the recommendations, the adoption with no change.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Mark. Are there any comments or questions from other members present, please, on this item? No. Other Cabinet members? No. In which case, can I put it to the vote, please? All those Cabinet members in favour? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, item 8, second workshop to service food waste vehicles. This is pages 25 to 36 of the agenda. I'll invite Councillor Jonathan Taylor Cabinet Member for Enterprise and Property to introduce the report, but I first have to mention that members will note that there is an exempt appendix to this item and should be mindful not to disclose any information contained in the exempt appendix. Thanks.
Okay. In the first quarter of 2026, the Council has a statutory requirement to operate a domestic food waste service. To facilitate this service, 15 new waste vehicles have been procured, new route programmes developed and a comprehensive communications campaign commenced. Existing waste vehicles are both housed and maintained at Hoppost. However, the additional vehicles are unable to be serviced at this workshop due to it being at capacity with insufficient space to extend it. 4 options have been reviewed to provide a workshop in alternative locations, along with investigating the potential of outsourcing the vehicle servicing. These are detailed in section 5 of the report. None of the options give the availability or immediacy that is available to us in creating a workshop at the ex-ambulance station by the time it is required in spring 2026. This property, which is owned by the council, was previously the location for the servicing of ambulance vehicles and since 2018 has accommodated the amateur dramatic group Hayot's. The property is available from January the 7th to start creating the workshop. In recent years, the property was kept on hold as part of a proposal to develop a larger Hurst Road site involving adjacent properties owned by other public bodies. Due to a variety of reasons, the larger development plan is no longer viable and the County Council have sold the neighbouring fire station site. To convert the ex-ambulance station to a workshop is estimated to cost $488,000. This includes initial repair works to the roof and the integration of energy-efficient lighting and heating to the building. More details of these costs are found in the exempt appendices, and it should be noted to all members there are detailed analyses for every single line of these expenditures, which we can give you in detail, both on the fixed and the ongoing costs. To assist with establishing the food waste programme, DEFRA have funding available, and an application towards the cost of creating the workshop is underway and will be applied to this project if successful. A planning application has also been submitted for a change of use back to the workshop, and that is due to come to committee in December. If the recommendations are approved by council, the building works will be procured as soon as possible so that the facility will be ready for the service launch. So the Cabinet is recommended to approve the conversion of the old ambulance station into a workshop to be used primarily for servicing the new food waste vehicles, to delegate authority to the Director of Resources to apply for any relevant grant funding to be used towards the cost of converting the premises, to delegate authority to the Director of Place in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Enterprise and Property to approve the final designs for the workshop, to approve the award of any contracts required to give effect to the conversion of the premises and the acquisition and installation of all required equipment, including an additional workshop van, and that the Cabinet is recommend to Council to approve the capital budget of up to £488,000 for the 25-26 financial year for the conversion of the premises and the acquisition and installation of the required commitment funded from the food waste earmarked reserve, and to approve a revenue budget of £17,585 for the 25-26 financial year to cover the running costs of the workshop and the loss of income from the tenant for the last quarter of the financial year to be funded from the food waste earmarked reserved. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. Councillor Clark.
Maybe somebody else would like to go first. No? Come.
Councillor Knoll. Go for it.
Thank you, Chair. I can't let Councillor Clark say everything tonight, can I? There's a couple of problems I see with this. And Councillor Clark might help me out with the second one, but there's basically an issue of obtaining planning permission before the Cabinet can go ahead with this. The ambulance station is actually located right in the middle of town. And although it's in a complex where the courts, police station and the post office are, it is nevertheless an urban area. We are asking our planning committee to approve putting in a basically industrial warehouse in the middle of all this, and it may or may not gain planning permission. So I see that from the report, the officers have looked at the alternative, which would be to outsource the operation. And I think, and we think together, that the officers may be confident that outsourcing would be a credible alternative here. The second item of the second big problem with this is the carbon impact. If you look at paragraph 11, and I'm not referring to anything that's, sorry, I've lost it on my, yes. Converting the old ambulance station into a workshop will lead to an increased carbon impact because of the use of heavy machinery, material transportation, and energy consumption during the refurbishment process. Now remember, as I said just now, this is more or less in the middle of an urban area. The ongoing operation of the workshop will contribute to emissions through electricity usage, vehicle maintenance process, and potential waste. The Cabinet report in March 24, 21st of March 24, talked of 80 tonnes of CO2 equivalent as a cost of making this extra operation work. So paragraph 11.2 is just a cut and paste from the Cabinet report back in March last year. So the Cabinet report is saying that this 80 tonnes could be offset by the biodigester operation, but there are no calculations to back this claim up. Now, we don't know what the new authority in 2 years' time is going to do with our waste collection. So we are creating an industrial complex in the middle of town, which is going to create more carbon than can be offset by the biodigester. And we don't know what's going to happen to it because the unitary authority may not want to offset this amount of carbon. And whatever happens, our carbon is going to increase. Our carbon footprint is going to increase. So that's my point of view. And I don't know if Councillor Clark wants to add anything to that. Thank you.
I think there's a question there for Councillor Jonathan Taylor to answer first before.
Yeah. Okay. Well, on the question of the planning, that is going to planning in December, and we are confident that it will go through planning. We've looked at the number of objections, very few objections coming in so far, and I don't know if Barbara wants to add anything more about the planning application, but we don't foresee that being an issue. Barbara, do you want to add anything to that?
If I can just interrupt, that sounds a rather predetermined assumption.
So the point I was going to make was that obviously we don't know what the outcome would be, but I think the point the Cabinet member is making is that from the early consultation that we have done with neighbouring letters to all of the neighbours surrounding, we've had very little feedback. although we have invited those comments. So I think the direction of travel is that we're heartened that we haven't been flooded in, despite contacting those individuals, at their own address. So we are hopeful that it will progress through the planning process, but obviously we don't know until we get through that committee.
On the second point about outsourcing, that has been looked at by officers as an alternative and looked at in detail in terms of the costing, and it was thought by the team that that was not a viable option on an ongoing basis. Now, the costs of that, I'm sure that if you want them in detail, Laura can go into why that option was not considered as an alternative. But the third point about carbon, again, we have now got detailed costings, which Laura from that team can take you through.
Now is not the time to ask Laura to do that, I don't think, but perhaps in the near future we could have an explanation, because the way I see it, if it's outsourced, then it goes to somewhere where no carbon, extra carbon will be used, and it would be cheaper if the new authority decides not to continue with it.
Jay, I think you've got something to add.
Well, if I can add some further
Microphone,
information to
Jay.
my colleagues.
Microphone.
Yeah,
Jay.
sorry. If I can add some further information to my colleague's response. Having, as Councillor Taylor said, worked through the alternatives in detail, and remember, this isn't the only alternative, there are a number of others. It's quite clear that the costs involved in order to provide the current service are the amounts shown in the report. The issue is that, in particular, it's about being able to have access to appropriate vehicles at short notice when we need them. And we can't predict when we're going to need them, because we need them when something goes wrong, essentially, with the current plans. So outsourcing does not give you the flexibility that provides the current quality of service. That's a real problem. It's not just about cost. It also does have cost, because you need the right vehicle at the right time, at short notice, sometimes for premium periods, and that's going to cost more. So that's the basic argument around the outsourcing costs, and also the service detriment that would be involved in outsourcing. The carbon output is more difficult to quantify. Let's remember, though, it has always been the case that we are the front end of the recycling process. In this case, we are the collection authority. So inevitably, our actions are going to require activity that generates CO2. We try to remediate that by obviously using more effective vehicles, both HVO, diesel and electric. But activity creates CO2. The other end of this is that the anaerobic digestion not only provides the other side of that equation, but it also provides material that can be used and can be sold in future, but not by us at the moment, but will be capable. The whole process will be in the remit of the Unitary Council. So the original estimate around CO2 production, and remember there was a lot of work done 3 years ago when the whole food waste project was being developed. The original estimate was that the sort of process we're introducing would be saving 392 tonnes of CO2. So if you see the figure of the 80 that you were talking about, Councillor Knoll, in that context, I hope that reassures you.
Roger.
Thank you, Chair. I am reassured by those figures, but this is a long-term operation, and as with everything this council is now doing over the next 2 years, there has to be an element of trust that the new authority will continue our good work. So all we can do, and I hope we can do, is keep our fingers crossed that our good plans are carried forward by the new authority. Thank you.
I think the only other thing I'd just like to add about a little reassurance or clarification on the planning process here. This is a planning application is in. Because this is council-owned property, that planning application will automatically come to the planning committee for determination. The planning committee is independent and will form its own view. So nothing is taken for granted, but at the same time, hopefully you would follow my logic, is that as the people submitting the planning application, we're confident, no more than that, but confident that it will be approved, because it would have been illogical for us to submit it if we weren't confident it would be approved. QED. Any other questions on this one? Councillor Croker.
Thank you, Chair. I probably shouldn't need to ask this, but I believe the Cabinet member mentioned a works van. Can I assume that will be electric?
Who's best placed to answer this one?
Well, I am actually going to ask the officer for that particular detail.
All right, thank you. So yes, any vehicle purchase that we do at the moment, we will assess it against whether we need to buy diesel or electric. But where we can buy electric, we always will, and it's highly likely that the workshop van will be electric.
Thanks. Councillor Clark.
Thank you. I could take up where my colleague left off. Going back to the 80 tonnes of CO2, I didn't catch the number that Jay came up with, but at the end of the day, my comment is it doesn't really matter where the offsetting mechanism is, because according to our strategy in terms of CO2 and all the rest of it, we have the CO2 emissions we are directly responsible for, but also the ones that we're not directly responsible for. So my main concern is that the waste and the food waste is being treated in a certain way that has a certain CO2 value to recover. We're looking at doing this biodigester stuff, which is fine. I just find it difficult to accept at face value a statement that it's okay and it's all fine. I want to see the numbers and I want to understand the logic, because I've done these calculations and it'll take me not great pleasure, but I like just to test to make sure the logic holds up. So what I would ask is perhaps prior to the council meeting that will be asked to endorse this cabinet decision, because I'm assuming it's a rubber stamp of the recommendation, that data be made to councillors just to reassure us with a proper set of numbers that this is done properly. So that's a request of things. If I look at, I've got another series of questions, basically, or do you want me to stop here and then I continue afterwards, Leader, if you don't mind?
Well, Jay's waving at me, so he can answer that one and then you can carry on.
I did want to answer that one specifically. We're dependent on the county council for the numbers, and so, you know, subject to being able to get that data from the county council, then of course we can make the numbers available. If we can't get it, we can't.
Councillor Clark.
I can't honestly think why they can't supply it, but then we're talking county council, so okay, fine. Looking at the documents in particular, I did note, and I'm careful what I say here, in the confidential appendix, there is an item about heating and removal of gas. And my question really was, what was that about? Is this to do with extraction fans and stuff because of CO2, DERV vapors and etc.? So you need a boosted extraction system. So that's my first question.
Microphone.
The answer to that one, Councillor Clark, is it's for the removal of the current gas boiler in the ancillary offices, kitchen and bathroom in line with the net zero commitment for Scope 1 buildings, removal and replacement of the air-to-air heat pump in the workshop.
Well, it's not an extraction of fumes and vapours and stuff like that, basically.
Councillor Clark, could I just ask, before you continue, how many questions there are? Because I'm sure you're aware it's a cabinet meeting rather than a scrutiny committee meeting.
That's a fair comment, Leader, but the problem is that we've not had a chance really to scrutinise the details of this before this meeting. So, I mean, the other questions were handled by my colleague here. I mean, the other one really is, why are we including loss of income in the calculations, basically? I mean, why are we capitalising that? I'll leave the more detailed questions for, because Jonathan already has them.
I have the details, and I've discussed this in detail with officers, but if you want us to go through that in detail in this forum, then
Paul? Well, I think the question's around why do you include loss of income in the calculation, why we're capitalising it? You may have the answer, but I'm just sort of inclined to ask Dom.
I don't think we're capitalising that particular element of it. That's the revenue impact, which is separate to any capital amount.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Any other cabinet members wishing to comment on this one? No, in which case then can I please move to a vote on the recommendations? All those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you very much. Item 9, draft annual plan 26-27. This is on pages 37 to 44 of the pack. I invite Councillor Tony Franklin, Cabinet Member for Performance, Customer Service and Communications, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Chair. So, yes, I'm pleased to bring this draft annual plan for the year 26 to 27 to this meeting this evening. And firstly, I'd like to thank the officers who have been involved in this for driving this process and continuing to do so as we develop the plan further. In summary, this is effectively the first list of those items, projects, initiatives that we wish to initiate or complete within the year 2026-27. I'll come on to the list shortly, but just the background here is to remind people that this annual plan follows annual plans in 23-24 and 24-25, and they all sit under the framework of the council plan that's been set at the start of this administration between 23 and 27. Just a reminder of the themes: supporting people and communities, inspiring greener futures, building and thriving economy, and always listening, learning and improving. I think that as in the previous annual plans and as we implement them in 26, 27, all of these initiatives will be measured against KPIs and reported on a quarterly basis and scrutinised in the same timeframes. Some of the activities and initiatives will be starting and completing within the plan year. Others may carry on beyond that period, and others may be a continuation of particular activities that have already started in previous plan years. It's quite ambitious, with actually 32 distinct projects and initiatives within it. Though I would compare that to actually 70, which are in the current 25-26 plan. Though when I look and compare them, I think that the ones in 26-27 are a little bit more substantial and real as projects. Some of the ones in the current plan, I think, are more task individual tasks that are done and completed as more minor items, I suppose. But it's not. It is still a substantial commitment, really, that we're trying to make for the coming year. I'm pleased also that we had the opportunity to have this first draft scrutinised at the Policy and Scrutiny meeting a couple of weeks ago. And thanks to those members who came to that meeting and brought questions and comments to it. And I think there were a couple I'd like to address here, because I think they are important, and they were very useful to bring out at that point. One was about the application of sort of SMART principles in determining some of these activities and plans, and I think it's not a bad tool to measure or to assess your tasks against. And I think we are at a draft stage, and some of these objectives do need tying down a little bit more. One or two are already very clear, like complete the introduction of domestic food waste collection service by the end of April 2026. That's clear, it's smart, it's absolutely clear what we have to do there. But there's another one here which probably will need to be tightened up before we get to the final plan. Implement the decision on the Broadbridge Heath running track, which is just a little bit woolly at the moment. Hopefully we'll be able to tidy up that and others as we scrutinise this plan further in the next couple of months before we have to complete it in February. We were asked about budgeting and had we budgeted for all these items, and at this stage we don't have complete sort of budget for all of these because we're still working through the costing process of this, and myself and Councillor Bainham and others, the annual plan and the budget are kind of intertwined, and as we bring them both to completion, it will become clearer whether the annual plan is supported by the budget and vice versa. One of the other items was, are we trying to do too much? And the answer is probably yes. And we recognise this. There may be items that we feel that we should pull out of the plan in order to, and we've discussed this earlier this evening, to ensure that the resources and capacity that we have over the next 18 months is sufficient to deliver these properly. And we will be, again, as I say, further scrutinising this plan to tune it before we bring it to completion in February. We were also asked about have we got resources assigned and timelines and detailed plans in place. It's a bit premature for that, so we would not be doing that until actually we finalise the plan. Back to listening, learning and improving. We have initiated a consultation process with residents, which actually will start on Monday and last for 2 weeks. We are looking for opinions, comments, and any ideas actually that might come out through that process. We do wish it could be longer. We're trying to fit into a timeline, and we accept that. But we feel it's really important to continue this process of informing and consulting as we did in the last round of this process last year. A quick word on timings. I think I mentioned them already. This will come forward to Cabinet in February 26. And word on risks. I mentioned one already. We try to do too much, and so we need to focus on that. And probably the other one is probably budgeting. Again, I've mentioned that as well. We need to ensure that our annual plan is integrated with our budget process, and that we can indeed afford to fund those activities in the annual plan. Some of them involve capital expenditure, and as we finalise the capital budget, that will also inform what we do and don't commit to in this annual plan. I think that's all I want to say about it at this point, but if there are any questions, be delighted to see if I can answer them.
Thanks, Tony. Members? Len got there first. Councillor Ellis-Brown.
Thank you very much. Firstly, thank the Cabinet member for rephrasing one of the objectives there. Look for opportunities to generate income and improve operating efficiencies. Thank you. My question really is, when we refine this further, will we be considering the results of the recent survey and how we can actually improve the results of that through the annual plan and subsequent annual plans?
Tony?
Yes, yeah, thanks for that question. And I think you're referring to the resident survey, yeah, which we briefed members on, I think it was last week or the week before, and will be published to residents before the end of this month. And indeed, there are a couple of items in here which fall out directly from that residents survey around consultation and safety, I think was another one. But the answer to your question is yes. And I know there are 3 items that are directly as a result of or aligned with some of the findings of that resident survey.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Leader. I just want to congratulate the administration on the depth and the breadth of this plan. I think it's very good, but I would just like to have my usual cry about the rest of the district. Apart from the Billingshurst plan and the leisure contract, there is very little in this plan that is going to affect the more rural areas of the district. And I hope that through this plan we can encourage parishes to develop their neighbourhood plans, which is going to be absolutely crucial over the next 2 years, because we could be left with a community facing massive planning obligations unless these neighbourhood plans can be made watertight over the next couple of years. I would also want to ask councillors from wards outside of Horsham to think carefully about what they require from this administration to help them prepare for the future, because the future is going to be very different to the existence that we have now. And I would therefore appeal to members, not necessarily in this room, but other members, to bring forward projects that can benefit their parishes and communities before there's no money left at the end of it all. That's my comment. Thank you.
Before I come back to you, Tony, just to say, neighbourhood plans can be reviewed, updated, strengthened. The one thing that can't be made is watertight. Tony.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think there were 2 points there, I think, that I picked up. One is I take on board the focus, the perception, or the focus that there might be around covering the whole district with this annual plan. I think that's something we should probably, when we do the ongoing review of this, look for opportunities or to identify where these activities do apply across the whole district, and make sure we're doing our best to make sure we are covering the whole district. I think that's something I would take on board. I think, and I think the second part of your question or comments was around what can we do better in developing annual plans in the future to involve parishes and town councils in development of the plan much earlier on, perhaps in the process than perhaps we've done here.
Yeah, I mean, this is a draft and we've been asked for comments, and I'd like my comments to be looked at and perhaps taken on board before you produce the final version. Thank you.
Any others? Any other cabinet member comments on this? Jay?
Well, I don't want to entirely disagree with Councillor Knoll because I do understand why he's concerned about those other wards, but I think it's unfortunate maybe that at the beginning of the plan, yes, there are a number of town sites mentioned or town projects, but if you actually read the plan from the back frontwards, nearly everything is either about the whole district or mentions things like parishes, countryside sites, etc. So, I mean, I'm looking at the always listening bit, the LGA peer challenge, that's everybody, conservation covenants about countryside sites, that's about the countryside, Broadbridge Heath isn't the town, it's a village. The budget is for everybody, provide parish councils with ongoing support and guidance, that's specifically about because we didn't have any parish council in the town. So I think that's a questionable assertion, to be honest. Thanks, Jay. I took a bit of scepticism there, but from the floor. But if you want to go to Broadbridge Heath and tell them that they're all part of the town, be my guest. I don't expect it to go down very well. Any other comments from any of the members? No. In which case, please can I move to a vote? In all those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, item 10, the forward plan. This item is for noting. Does any member of the Cabinet have anything to say on this item? No. 11, to consider matters of special urgency. There are no matters of special urgency this evening, so I thank you very much all for your time and wish you a safe journey home. Thanks.